I'll just hit this really lightly on the stone here. I don't think there are any burrs on here, but just to make sure. And this middle spring rides against the bottom of the disconnector here, so I'm going to just hit it real lightly on the stone here, make sure it's smooth. Same thing I did with the hammer, I'll do with the sear, just make sure no burrs on the edge. Yeah, just a little bit of paint came off, so that was already nice and flat and nice and smooth. There we go, we are in the 405, 40432. So that's the tallest quadrant. And this is a brand new sear. So I can see that the nose of this thing is standing proud of this jig. So that's good. Looks like that side's down, this one isn't quite down all the way. Look at that. That is really stiff, really tight. But considering all the work this frame has taken, I'm not surprised. It's the first time I've had to hammer in it. It's a little looser here, but as you move it down it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. It's really tight. So that's no good. So let's figure that out. So this is a brand new hammer. This kit of pins and springs, brand new. That's perfect. That's fine. So the problem is definitely the way the hammer fits into the frame here. So let us take this piece of 600 and just run the hammer sides. This is thinner up here. This is machined separately. That's what's rubbing. So I'm just going to take a few strokes on each of those sides on this 600 grit. See if that helps. That may have done it. No, still tight. So when I just set the hammer in the frame, there's plenty of room, it moves freely. When I put the pin in, it gets tight. So it seems like the hole maybe is not drilled square, or the cuts inside the frame here, the machining of this slot is not square to that pinhole. Because there's plenty of room for the hammer, but then when you put the pin in, it's got to be cocking the hammer in a way that causes it to start binding. I used some 220, is that 220? Yeah, and then back to 600 to take a little more off the sides of the hammer. It's nice and loose up at the top, but it starts to get tight down about where that hammer is going to go at its rearward most travel. So this still bothers me, but I think I can at least test my trigger for the time being. But it's definitely another problem with this frame, and I'm not sure it's one that I can really do a great job fixing. That's the half-cock notch. And there we go. It's against the sear now. Now the slide's bumping against the top of the disconnector. There we go. Well, let's see. Okay, it's super heavy. Potentially some of that could be this tight hammer back here. Trigger movement itself, maybe a hair heavier than I like from the triple spring. I may reduce that some. No creep, but it's heavy. So anyway, we're off to a good start, at least. Well, other than the hammer issue. I'll work on that a little more, I think. I think the first thing I'll do is back off the triple spring on the sear. And also on the trigger a little bit. That's the easiest thing to try. I think I need to feed back in some on this middle one here. Unfortunately, this part of this frame is really sharp. Yeah, I probably could have put the beaver tail in here. Wouldn't hurt anything. That's better. So that reducing the weight of the triple springs seems to have helped some. Alright, I can't get the safety in. I think I need to go ahead and fit this, so I just left out for the moment the beaver tails being held in place by the mainspring housing here. Anyway, adjusting those triple springs made a big difference. It's actually pretty light now. I'll adjust over travel. I don't know what that was. I was pulling the trigger and nothing was happening. Maybe that sticky hammer. Yeah, there's creep. Oh no, wait a minute. So that's what I thought before. I thought, oh, there's creep. But then the hammer didn't fall, so it's not creep. It's... I think it's this hammer sticking in the frame. So let me be careful again and try this. Yeah. Okay, when it works, I don't feel any creep. Yeah, when I feel creep, it's because this thing isn't working. Alright, I'll probably use the 220 and the 600 to take a hair more off the sides of the hammer, I think. Because the thing is, when these hammers come back, they come back almost to the point, almost to what I guess I'd refer to as on center. In other words, if they came back any further, the spring would continue to push them around. So they're almost at that spot. So if they stick at all, they don't tend to move. It just sits there. So I think that sticky hammer is causing these malfunctions. Yeah. Yeah, see that? I held the trigger and then I was able to just pull the hammer past that sticky spot. Alright, but that trigger job, actually on the first try there, may be good. After I work on that sticky hammer, I'll play with it a little more. Alright, I think that my theory that pin is going through those holes, through the frame, at an angle and cocking this hammer, so to speak, is accurate. Look at that. So it's rubbing on the top of the left side and on the bottom of the right side. So that proves my theory. So I'll just do a little more running over the sandpaper with this thing, but I'll just apply a little more pressure on the lower part of this side and a little more pressure to the top of that side to try to take off as little as possible. Anyway, that's messed up. Just one of many problems I've had with this frame. That's made it a lot more work. Alright, let's make one adjustment, and that's of the trigger over travel screw. It's just a little set screw right there. And you use a, what is this? This is a, it's a 1/16 Allen wrench. And what you want to do is screw it in as far as you can. And what it does is it bumps into the mag release. So when you pull the trigger, that set screw hits the mag release, and that's what stops this. And basically you want this to go as far as it needs to go to release the hammer, but no further. If it goes further, you're just wasting motion with your trigger finger. This is one of the nice features of the 1911, is the trigger. And the potential for an amazing trigger. So if the trigger doesn't fall, we know we went too far. And there's another thing to check for too. And what I'll do eventually, not right now, but I'll put Loctite on there. You don't want that screw moving. If it moves, if it screws in further while you're shooting, you are hosed. And again, my idea for this is a combat pistol, so it is critical that that set screw does not screw in further inadvertently while you're using the gun. So Loctite is important. Okay, the gun will not fire. I went in too far. Alright, so now it fires. So then, one other thing to check for, that this does not necessarily mean it's adjusted perfectly. It may have very little over travel, but you may have to still let the screw out a hair more. And here's the reason. The trigger can go in far enough to drop the hammer, but it might not go in far enough to pivot the sear nose completely out of the way of the hammer. The half-cocked notch of the hammer may touch the sear on the way down, and you don't want that. It'll just wear out the trigger, or it'll wear out the sear prematurely, or hurt your trigger job. So you don't want that. So here's what let's do. I'm going to pull the trigger all the way. Alright. Now I totally feel it catching right there. Actually, it's catching on the hammer hooks. So the sear's popping out enough from under the hammer hooks to release the hammer, but not enough to get completely out of the way. So let's back off this screw a little bit more. Just so that we avoid that rubbing. There we go. It's not rubbing at all right now. And I just screwed it out maybe a quarter turn. So that set screw is adjusted so that it will drop the hammer, but it lets the trigger move back far enough so that it gets the sear completely out of the way and won't allow the sear nose to rub on the hammer as the hammer falls. So I've minimized trigger over travel. There's the slack. So it's got very, very, very little slack. Now watch from the time the hammer falls, watch the over travel. Outstanding.